Hello, I'm Dr. Darlene Chambers, Senior Vice President for Programs and Services at the National Charter Schools Institute. Thanks for joining me today. Quality authorizers provide charter schools with strong performance feedback loops to align with the authorizer's monitoring system and schools in order to provide schools clarity on where they stand relative to the authorizer expectations and legal expectations. No surprises. Authorizers use policies, practices, and systems to set expectations for and provide feedback to charter schools, documenting areas of strength or concern through a variety of mediums. Let's talk about those. Contract review, site visits perhaps, informal conversations, compliance reports. It's all authorizer accountability. This forms the oversight and monitoring of the charter school contract during the term of that contract. Our time today is to discuss the building blocks or flow of the authorizer performance oversight and decision making, guided by the question in front of you. What authorizer high-stake decisions do performance metrics help inform? How do I navigate that balancing act of oversight and support? Let's begin. I developed a flowchart for the state of Wisconsin. It includes authorizer accountability and intervention. Let's go over the building blocks of what data collection and oversight build information to make a high-stake decision. First of all, I highly recommend that you consider a comprehensive and negotiated performance framework, a set of frameworks including academic, financial, and operational. You may not have those right now. You may have chosen to embed the metrics for academic, financial, and operational performance within the next building block. A contract, and you define the compliance monitoring and oversight with your performance metric expectation. So can you just have the contract and not the performance frameworks? Yes. But the reason why I'm highly recommending the performance frameworks, and so does the National Association of Charter School Authorizers, as well as the Wisconsin Best Practices Guide, is that those frameworks can become a formalized, board voted on policy that really clarifies to the public expectations for the metrics and what type of rubric decision making you're going to use to determine whether or not the metrics are met. If the contract-defined compliance monitoring and oversight is not met, and there becomes issues on performance, or perhaps a continuous improvement area, I'm very positive about maybe not necessarily meeting the top metric, but having a continuous improvement plan to address issues and making that performance stronger. An intervention system that is defined and communicated is very helpful to the authorizer in oversight and compliance and addressing an unmet metric. Technical guidance for all the building blocks above in your flow. If you have performance metrics, provide technical support and training on what is entailed in your framework policy. That you help the school and the school board and public understand the expectations of the contract. And if you do have an intervention system on metrics not met, that the schools are fully informed, that the public understands what you're going to do about it and the potential triggers that would cause an intervention and the consequences of not meeting a metric. The annual performance evaluation and report is required by Wisconsin law. And hey, it's just a flat out great practice that at least once a year that you identify areas, and now you know that Darlene loves to talk about strengths. Give a shout out to your schools on what's going right. And then, of course, always help them improve and let them see that there may be some metrics that they need to increase and maybe some practices at the school that they need to look at. And all of the building blocks, the frameworks, the contract, the intervention system, good guidance and support, and the annual performance evaluation report, one on top of the other, on top of the other, and all the data collection, hopefully informs a positive renewal or helps the board and the authorizer, the school board and the authorizer understand that maybe it's time for closure or revocation. Perhaps the measurements were unattainable and it's time to shut the school door. I'm hopeful that the contract can be renewed and that the school was able to deliver the performance expected when the school door opened the first time on behalf of the students and the parents. I talked a lot about intervention. There's far more in a different buzz course that you can attend on building your intervention policy, but I wanted to give you a quick overview of what an intervention could include. It needs to be clearly defined in the contract, the policy, always evidence-based, always communicated. So think about the process, the methods, the timing of the remedy. If I give you a notice as a school, me being the authorizer, are you expecting that they come back with a plan to address the issue in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? And also in your intervention, be very careful to explain that if you don't improve on this metric, if you don't address this issue, that there's going to be repercussions, perhaps probation, perhaps revocation of the charter. Communicate regularly with schools as needed. Hopefully, you will find that there may be an issue brewing far before you need an intervention. And if you have that regular communication, there will be no need for the intervention. But if something does happen, make sure you provide timely notice of contract violations and performance deficiency. Telling a school they have a week to fix something is not necessarily fair. Provide technical guidance to ensure timely compliance with applicable rules and regulations. Remember in my flow chart we talked about that as you address those building blocks of accountability and oversight, that you educate the school about expectations all along the way and how you're making your decisions, how you're making your judgments on whether performance expectations are met or not met. In your intervention, that it be incremental, articulated in writing, and enforced. Remember, what gets done gets measured. And if you put it in the contract and never address any of the measures in the contract, or if the measurements aren't met and there's no intervention, what worth is the oversight and the metrics in the first place? In your intervention ladder, if you choose one, that it increases in severity from, hey, I'm noticing that 60 days cash isn't as healthy as it might need to be, as opposed to suddenly putting a school on suspension or probation because they don't have 60 days cash. So notice of concern in your intervention policy or ladder might be a letter just putting in writing that there's this issue brewing and you've noticed, to a letter of probation, which is very serious and might put in specific dates for addressing a particular issue. I hope this checklist gave you a high-level overview. Now, how does the school board, put together a plan to address the issue that you've noticed, that you've written in a letter, that you've talked to them about. I'm writing this or presenting this to you today as an authorizer reading a school's corrective action plan, or for a charter school board addressing an issue that an authorizer may have put forward. Clearly restate the problem or performance area. So authorizer, you better see this in the action plan. Schools, important that you pay attention to the problem that was introduced or mentioned. That the plan states the intended outcome or root cause. What was the root cause of the problem or the performance area? So many times on a action plan, we address the disease or and not the symptoms that are causing the disease. So what are the root causes? Create a simple, measurable, strategic set of actions to address the cause of the issue. Identify responsible people. Authorizers, you'll want to see who's actually going to be looking at the issue you presented, that they're assigned, that there's someone for you to talk to. Schools, make sure you assign responsible people to it, that you set achievable deadlines for the action plan, that you monitor and communicate progress. Authorizers expect your schools to know that you're monitoring the plan. And I might even recommend for both the authorizers and schools that you put in milestone conversations. Could be once a quarter, could be certain times during the action plan to make sure you're going in the right direction to address the issue at hand. And always try to come up with a plan to not get in this place where you are now with the issue. How are we going to assure on behalf of the schools and the authorizer that this is not going to happen again? What kind of key practices are you going to put together to make sure that you're monitoring no more slippage, no more issue creation, and that you're going to use this plan strategically moving forward? I hope that the corrective action plan guide sheet and the intervention checklist gave you some insights on how to address what happens when the performance metrics are not met and get the school back on course, sort of recalibrate. Let's begin with the question we started with. What authorizer high-stake decisions do performance metric help inform? You saw the flow chart. I hope I also added in for all of you today what to do when the performance metrics aren't met. Thank you for joining me.